People love to say it like it's a guarantee. Labrador Retrievers love everyone. It sounds comforting, simple, safe, the kind of sentence that makes you trust a dog before you even meet it. But what if that idea isn't entirely true? Because when you look closer, when you stop seeing friendliness as a personality and start seeing it as communication, something shifts. That loose, wiggling body, the fast tail that never quite settles, the quick approach, the lowered head, the eager face licking. Most people read it as pure affection. But in canine language, those same signals often carry a second meaning: appeasement, a strategy dogs use to reduce tension, to say, I'm safe, you're safe, there's no threat here. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What if your Labrador isn't always greeting the world with confidence, but with a need to keep things calm? Behaviorists have long noted that humans tend to misread these signals. We see warmth. The dog may be managing uncertainty. And when a breed is selected for sociability, over and over, generation after generation, it doesn't just amplify friendliness. It can also blur the line between joy and emotional regulation. So the question isn't whether your dog is loving. It's whether you're seeing the full picture why. Because once you do, that wagging tail starts to say something very different. To understand why this friendliness exists, we have to go back to what the Labrador was actually bred to be. What most people call personality is often design. The Labrador wasn't shaped to stand apart from humans. It was shaped to move with them, quietly, precisely, without friction, not as an independent decision maker, but as a partner tuned to human intent. Go back to where this began. Cold water, long distances, a hunter waiting, and a dog whose job was not to question, but to respond, retrieve, return, repeat, over and over, in silence, in focus, in sync. This wasn't casual companionship. It was cooperative work at a high level. So generation after generation, the traits that survived weren't bold independence or emotional self-reliance. They were something else entirely. Low aggression, high responsiveness, an almost reflexive attention to human cues. A Labrador doesn't just notice you. It orients to you. Your movement, your tone, your slightest shift, it all matters because historically it had to. And over time, that level of attunement becomes more than training. It becomes biology. Modern behavioral studies point to this clearly. Breeds selected for cooperative tasks tend to show higher levels of social dependency, not weakness, but reliance, a built-in tendency to seek direction, to maintain harmony, to avoid conflict before it even forms. That's where the friendliness starts to look different, because what you're seeing isn't random affection. It's a system designed to keep the social environment smooth, predictable, safe. Your Labrador greets a stranger not just because it loves people, but because engaging positively has always been the safest, most reinforced choice. And there's something deeply admirable in that. This dog was shaped over centuries to work alongside humans without resistance, to prioritize connection over confrontation, to choose cooperation again and again, even when the situation is unclear. But design always comes with trade-offs. When a dog is built to look outward for cues, to stabilize its world through others, it doesn't always build the same internal stability on its own. And that's where the shift begins. Because cooperation at its peak is seamless, but when it leans too far, it starts to become something else. But when cooperation becomes dependency, something subtle begins to shift. We tend to measure happiness by volume. The faster the tail, the higher the jump, the louder the greeting. The more we assume the dog must feel good. It looks like joy. It feels like joy. So we call it joy. But arousal and happiness aren't the same thing. And your Labrador lives right on that line. Think about what happens when you walk through the door. The explosion of movement. The full body wiggle that can't quite organize itself. The jumping, the spinning, the urgent need to make contact. Now, immediately, it's easy to smile at that moment. Most people do. But if you slow it down, if you watch instead of react, you start to see something else layered underneath. The inability to settle, the repeated face licking, the way the dog checks you, then checks again, as if the interaction hasn't quite resolved. In behavioral terms, These can be displacement and appeasement signals, not signs of a problem, but signs of pressure being managed in real time. Even physiologically, the picture shifts. Studies on canine stress responses show that high-intensity greetings can trigger spikes in cortisol, the same hormone associated with stress and arousal. The body isn't distinguishing between good excitement and overwhelming stimulation. It's simply activating. So what you're seeing isn't always calm happiness. It's activation without regulation. There's a version of sociability that's quiet, measured, a dog that approaches, acknowledges, and then settles beside you. No urgency, no overflow, just presence. And then there's the version most Labradors are known for, frantic engagement. Not because something is wrong, but because the system has been wired to respond quickly, intensely, and socially without always having the tools to come back down on its own. And once you see that difference, it's hard to unsee, because now every greeting becomes a question. Is this comfort or is this coping? And when those signals are misunderstood consistently, the behavior doesn't disappear, it intensifies. We like to believe friendliness comes from ease. A dog that rushes toward everyone must feel secure in the world. But often, it's the opposite. For many Labradors, that intense social pull isn't just a preference. It's a way of managing uncertainty, a strategy that says, if I engage quickly, if I keep everything positive, nothing bad will happen. It looks confident, but it's actually careful. In canine behavior, anxiety doesn't always hide. Sometimes it reaches outward. Dogs that feel unsure will often increase social behavior, approaching faster, licking more, staying close, trying to control the emotional tone of the interaction before it has a chance to turn. That's hypersocialization, not withdrawal, but overengagement. And it works, at least in the moment, because people respond. They laugh, they pet, they reward the intensity without realizing what they're reinforcing. The dog feels attention rise, performs a familiar pattern, and the environment softens. Relief. So the brain learns something very specific. Not this is who I am, but this is what keeps me safe. And over time, that loop strengthens. Each greeting becomes slightly more urgent, slightly harder to interrupt. Not because the dog is choosing excess, but because the behavior has become its most reliable form of emotional regulation. There's another layer. 2. Boundaries. A dog that doesn't know where the line is, who is constantly allowed to enter every space, greet every person, escalate every interaction, never learns how to stabilize internally. The outside world becomes the only reference point. And without that internal anchor, the need to manage the outside grows stronger. So what you're seeing isn't just friendliness. It's a dog working, quietly, constantly, to keep its world predictable. And when you start to see it that way, something changes. Not concerned, not an alarm. Empathy. Because underneath all that enthusiasm, there's a system trying to feel secure. And the more we reward this behavior, the more we unknowingly shape it into something deeper. It doesn't start as a mistake. It starts as a moment. You walk in, your Labrador rushes forward, and without thinking, you respond. Your voice lifts, your hands reach out. You meet that intensity with warmth because it feels right to, and in that instant, something is reinforced. Not love, but the way love is expressed. In learning theory, this is simple. Behavior followed by reward becomes more likely to happen again. Operant conditioning doesn't care about intention. It tracks outcomes. So when your dog greets you with full body urgency and you answer with attention, touch, eye contact, you're strengthening the entire pattern. The speed, the intensity, the inability to pause. Not because you trained it deliberately, because you responded naturally. Timing makes it even more precise. Dogs don't store the moment the way you do. They connect what's happening right now with what follows next. So if the reward arrives at the peak of excitement, the peak becomes a target. And there's another layer most people never consider: emotional contagion. Dogs don't just read your actions, they absorb your state. If your energy spikes, if your voice tightens with excitement, or your body becomes animated, your dog mirrors it. The interaction feeds itself, looping higher each time. You didn't create the pattern, but you are shaping its direction. That's not blame. It's influence. Because the same system that reinforces anxiety-driven behavior can also guide a dog toward calm, toward clarity, towards something more stable than constant reaction. And it begins with awareness. So here's a simple shift. Next time your dog greets you, don't change everything, just watch. Notice the moment before you respond. The pace, the tension, the effort behind the behavior. That single pause can show you more than months of assumption. And if this is the kind of lens you want to keep developing, the kind that changes how you see your dog, not just how you train it, stay with this. There's more beneath the surface than most people ever notice. Because once you start seeing behavior this way, you don't go back. So if this isn't just personality and it's not just training, what is a Labrador really trying to do? We assume dogs come with an off switch, that at some point, they'll simply settle. But for many Labradors, that switch isn't missing. It was never fully built. Because when a dog spends most of its life in a state of social readiness, watching, responding, engaging, it doesn't just learn how to connect. It forgets how to disengage. The nervous system adapts to what it repeats. High interaction, frequent stimulation, constant feedback. These conditions keep the system activated, not in crisis, but never fully at rest. And over time, that becomes a baseline. You might see it in small ways. The pacing that starts for no clear reason. The way your dog follows you from room to room, unable to settle unless you stop moving. The sudden burst of attention seeking, nudging, pawing, bringing toys, not out of boredom, but out of a need to do something with the energy that won't quiet on its own. This isn't disobedience. It's dysregulation. In stable behavioral patterns, dogs cycle naturally. Engagement followed by decompression, activity followed by rest. The nervous system rises, and then it comes back down. But when structure is inconsistent, when stimulation is frequent and boundaries are loose, those cycles start to break. Rest becomes shallow, brief, easily interrupted, and the dog learns something subtle but powerful. Stillness doesn't feel safe, so it keeps moving, keeps checking, keeps reaching outward, because inward, there's no clear signal to stop. That's where impulsivity begins to grow, not as a flaw, but as a byproduct. A system that never fully resets will always look for the next release. And from the outside, it can still look like friendliness, engagement, personality. But underneath, there's a constant hum, a body that doesn't quite know how to be off. And once you recognize that pattern, it's hard to ignore what it means, because this isn't about energy levels. It's about identity, which leads us to the truth most owners never consider. We've been calling it love. But what if it's something quieter and more essential than that? Your Labrador doesn't move toward everyone because it feels the same deep affection for every person it meets. It moves toward them because engagement creates clarity, predictability, a sense that the moment won't turn uncertain. In social animals, safety isn't always found in distance. Sometimes it's found in connection. Behavioral research shows that animals will actively seek interaction to stabilize their environment, not out of emotional overflow, but because interaction reduces ambiguity. It answers a question before it becomes a problem. Friendliness, in that context, becomes a tool, a way of shaping the outcome. When your dog approaches quickly, softens its body, offers contact, it's not making a statement about how much it loves the person in front of it. It's making the situation readable, safe, because unpredictability is the real tension. Not people themselves, but what people might do, how they might respond, whether the moment will stay calm or shift into something else. And your Labrador has learned, deep in its wiring, that proactive friendliness tilts the odds. It smooths the edge before the edge appears. So the behavior isn't fake. But it isn't what we've been calling it either. It's adaptive, a strategy shaped over generations and reinforced in everyday life, a way of navigating a complex social world without conflict, without hesitation, without waiting to see what happens next. And when you see it through that lens, something changes. You stop asking, why is my dog so friendly? And you start asking, what is my dog trying to stabilize? That question opens a different kind of relationship, one built on awareness, not assumption, on understanding the function beneath the feeling, because your dog isn't offering love indiscriminately. It's creating safety the only way it knows how. And once you see it this way, you can't unsee it. The goal isn't to take the friendliness away, it's to give it a foundation. Because once you understand what's driving your Labrador's behavior, the question shifts. You're no longer trying to make your dog more social. You're trying to make that social energy feel safe to live inside. Balanced socialization doesn't mean more exposure. It means better experiences, slower ones, clearer ones, moments where your dog can approach, then disengage without pressure to keep performing. And what you reinforce begins to matter in a different way. Not the loud greeting, not the frantic contact, but the pause, the breath between actions, the moment your dog chooses to settle, even briefly. That's where stability starts to grow, quietly, almost invisibly. Structure helps shape that. Predictable routines, boundaries that don't restrict, but guide, interactions that end before they overflow. Over time, something changes. The same dog who once rushed to manage every moment begins to trust that it doesn't have to, and the friendliness doesn't disappear. It softens, becomes more intentional, more grounded, less about controlling the world, and more about simply being part of it. That's where the real bond lives, not in constant excitement, but in shared calm. So the next time someone says, Labradors love everyone, you'll hear it differently, not as a certainty, but as a beginning of a deeper truth.